All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics in Conflict. I'm here to provide you a follow up, as I said I will last time, and also to put things in perspective for you. So, I'm going to provide a brief analysis, an independent, objective one, based on my understanding, based on given my background as a geopolitical analyst, a former military academician, and I've been on the ground, so I kind of have a little bit of different understanding that will be slightly different from what the media is providing. So, without further ado, let me jump into it right away. So, I know there is a lot of bombardments of informations from a different. It won't matter. The more you hear, the better it is. Except that the question that becomes for you is you need to understand that information. It's not about just receiving the information, but rather understanding it. And this is where having an understanding of how to decipher that information. Well, first of all, I'm going to talk about two or three main issues. That's all I'm going to focus about. The sanctions. What does it mean? Also, what is Russian President Putin is thinking. And the third one is there going to be a World War III? So, okay, those are just three basic things that I'm going to be sharing with you. And I'll make sure by next week I'll do a follow up on it. So let's talk about the sanctions and why the sanctions are very important to understand at least the dynamics of that. Well, it is important because you have now the United States and the Europeans or European Union, that is, at least conversion on the same way of thinking, shall we say, by imposing sanctions. Of course, sanctions are a tool. Usually, countries use the tool, but when I use this as a tool of their foreign policy, but when I say countries, only countries who possess the power to use the tools. For example, if you take an offense to any country in Africa or country in Latin America or Asia, whatever, can they impose sanctions? No, they can't. But if you take countries like Russia, like China, like the United States, Germany to a degree, yes, they can. In the case of the United States and Europe regarding the sanctions on Russia, the statements coming out of Brussels, and I did read the press release from the European Union meeting that took place on Thursday. And I remember I did a breaking news on it, but we did it on a different platform. So basically what they use in the term, we're going to use harsh sanctions to cripple the Russian economy. The same thing coming out of the mouth of our president, President Biden, are saying we're going to crumple the economy. Well, here's the bottom line to that. Those sanctions are tame. That ain't going to harm the Russians. Because here is why, and I'm going to give you an example. For example, and I read the Department of Treasury, and I'll post a link for you guys so you can see that one yourself. Basically, it says that the United States is going to impose financial sanctions on the oligarchs, the Russian oligarchs. Well, hypothetically, if you are a Russian oligarch and you happen to be in Zurich or Paris, whatever, and you want to use your credit card, your black card, it's not going to work, assuming that institution is linked to the US financial system. Well, of course, you have 10 other or 50 other ways to go around that. You're going to use cash because you're an oligarch making so much money. Okay? That's just common sense. The other thing that's saying, for example, the EU and the US decided to impose sanctions on Russia's export of wheat. Well, why wheat? Because Russia is number one in wheat. China already decided to import wheat from Russia. That's going to make up for the difference. Other countries in the Arab world, that's going to be impacted slightly because they use a lot of wheat from Russia. Like, for example, Egypt, Algeria, Morocco, Yemen. Those countries, they use wheat, but it won't matter. The key sanctions that usually could create problems for Russia will be tied to two sectors that I want you to know. No matter what you hear, there are two sections. One of them is energy, okay? And the other one is the SWIFT system, and I'll explain each one of them briefly. For the energy, why, for example, there is no sanctions on Nord Stream 2, the pipeline that imports gas from Russia to Germany? Well, because Europe, and I remember I did mention this in some previous videos, that Europe imports about 40 to 46% of its energy needs from Russia. And even Russia itself today, this with the military intervention, whatever, they said they are not going to cut off the export of gas to Europe. So Germany, as of today, all they're doing is putting a halt on certifying the Nord Stream 2. That is, watch the language here, because what the media says versus what it is. Certifying Nord Stream 2, meaning just makes it officially operational. They are just holding off on that. They didn't say we're going to sanction it. In other words, it will be no Nord Stream 2. Why? Because Germany is going to be losing big time. I just got a communication from some people in Europe, and they're already telling me that the energy bills are going up already in Germany, in Italy, in Greece, in Cyprus. They're already feeling now the impact of energy prices are going up. Even for us here in the United States. Yesterday I stepped outside and I noticed that gas for us is about $3.29. Never thought we'll ever see that. There is now possibility with what's going on with Russia, and if the US and Europe moves forward with the sanctions, gas in the United States will be about $6 a gallon. That will be a major problem for the United States, and it's already a major problem. Then there is the other aspects of the sanctions. For example, the Europeans and the United States said we're going to sanction the key sectors in the Russian economy. For example, the what we call them, microchips. You know, it's ridiculous for them, the US and the EU, to be saying that. Why is this important for you to know? It's because to produce microchips, what do you need? Beside platinum and titanium, and you need one key ingredient. And the key ingredient is neon gas. And who produces neon gas? Russia provides the world with a 70% of neon gas. So if you're gonna go, you, the European Union, you, the United States, going to sanction Russia regarding the microchips, you're gonna be harming yourself. That is, let me silence this here. I don't want any distraction. So that is basically where the issue is. And that is why, despite what you hear, it might not be what it is. Remember, politicians will have to appear tough. We have to appeal to their constituents by showing them that, well, we are doing at most of what we could do. But at the heart of it, okay, the sanctions might not mean a thing to Russia. The other aspects that I want to talk to you about is one specific one regarding the sanctions from the European Union. And this one has to do with cutting off Russia from using the European financial systems in borrowing money or something. For example, this one has to do with bonds. And I'm not going to get into the weeds of financial here stuff, just to understand. That means Russia will not be able to issue any bonds in Europe. Well, Russia doesn't need to do that, because here is what Western media didn't disclose to people for them to understand, is that Russia sits on over $600 billion in cash as we speak. Okay? Over $600 billion in cash, which is a lot of reserves. But out of the over $600 billion in cash, about $152 billion in gold, the equivalency of gold. Well, why is that important, you may ask? It is important because with the crisis that's going on right now, the prices of gold is going up. It's about $100 an ounce, which means what? It means that Russia, as we speak, they are making $7 billion on the gold that is just sitting. in Russia. So to them, who cares for the sanctions? They are still making money. And the reason I'm saying all this is for you to break it down, for you to understand, despite what you hear the term harsh sanctions on this and that, don't get fooled by that. The other aspects to all this has to do with one of the major one that the United States and the European Union decided not to do yet is to remove Russia out of the SWIFT system. Well, what is the SWIFT system? The SWIFT system basically is, and I'm going to spell the word for you, is the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. That's all it means. Basically, SWIFT is a very high secure messaging network that connects thousands of banks, about almost over 11,000 financial institutions around the world. And it's all started back in 1973. Why 1973? Because that's when the United States got rid of the gold to back up the dollar. So that's what was interesting. And it's all basically what it is. This is with no global accepted alternative, because that is where the issue is with this SWIFT, because there's no other alternative as of now. And I am sure Russia and China are working on something else, because if you have an alternative system, the SWIFT will become irrelevant, shall we say. And usually, just FYI for you to understand, it started with the National Bank of Belgium that has teamed up with the US Federal Reserve System, the Bank of England, and the European Central Bank. That is the reason why you need to understand the importance of all this. And the question becomes that we all need to ask is, will they work? Will this sanction work? My answer is no. Russia might feel a little bit here and there, but why? Because there are ways to work around the system. And I am sure Russia already figured that out, because it will be naive, very naive, as a geopolitical analyst. It will be naive to think that the Russian president engaged in all this without considering the options and the possibilities and the scenarios. As geopolitical analyst, I always have to think of scenarios, for example, and this will be one of them. There is no way, and I'll challenge whomever, that Russia engaging in all this without having to think about the possibilities of what if. Because this didn't happen overnight. This was in a plan for almost 8 months to a year. That's how they're thinking. So there becomes the question of, could this issue truly, could this military intervention, and if you noticed, guys, I'm not using the term invasion, I'm using the term military intervention. And the reason being is there's a difference between a military specialized operation or intervention and an invasion. For example, when we went to Iraq, usually we went under the pretext of invasion. Why? Because the objective was to remove the Syrian government. As of today, this issue or this military special ops, I would say, special military operations in Ukraine, Russia did not ask for the removal of the Ukrainian president. So, to my knowledge, it did not. But the bottom line to it is, could this be avoided? Yes, it could have been 2 or 3 days ago. If only Ukraine, the government stated that we do not want to be part of NATO and we will comply with the Minsk agreement. Why is this important? Because you're not going to hear Western media talking about Minsk agreement. Well, the Minsk agreement has been violated for the last 7 years. Basically, that's where the Russian-speaking population living within Ukraine was not protected. And usually, back in 2014, after Crimea was annexed, the Minsk agreement came to existence, by which the Russian-speaking population in Ukraine will be protected. Well, this didn't happen. And yet Western Europe and the West didn't want to address it. And this is where one of the core issues that's going to be addressed regarding all this. So, yes, as I said earlier, all this could have been avoided if NATO didn't expand eastward all the way to Russia's doorsteps. But as of now, it's too late for this conversation because it will be just waste of time and energy, and it doesn't make any sense. Russia decided to move in, and I am sure they considered all the possible scenarios. So as it stands right now, the operation was supposed to be limited to the Donbas area. Why Donbas area? Because that's on the eastern side of Ukraine, closer to Russia's border. And within the Donbas area, that's where the two newly independent, what do we call them? Sovereign entities, the Donetsk and Luhansk, have been recognized by Russia as an independent states, which means what? That means now they can ask for the assistance from whomever recognized them, what Russia did, which was a smart move and a tactical move that the Russian president made last, I think, a Monday ago, a week and a half ago or so. So that makes it now official that the ethnic Russians who live in this area will be protected under the Russian forces. As a matter of fact, what led to all this, because you need to ask the question, which I was surprised that I didn't hear, as to why all of a sudden Russia decided to launch these military operations. It's because it was the establishment of some entities inside Ukraine propped up by the West. So my to Russian president's thinking is, if I don't act now, it will be too late. That is the reason why he decided to give the order and move forward to decide on this one. As I said earlier, if Ukraine would have stated, for example, Ukrainian government, that we have no objective or no desire to join NATO, they won't be paying the price they are paying today. There is now a conversation that is going on as to, for example, the civilians are being armed. So I can see the problems coming up with that one, and the problems are as follows. Yes, you're gonna hear the words that everybody's gonna take arms and all that stuff, which is fine. You know, you sort of you give credit where credit's. You applaud them for the courage, whatever they decide to do. But the issue with that is now you're going to have civilians who have not even been trained. Some of them have never fired a weapon before. Okay, but that's not where the issue. The issue is now, if any of the civilians is killed, which most likely they will be, it's going to become the question of war crimes. And this is why Russia asked Ukraine to negotiate with one condition. And the first condition is for them to lay down their arms. So there was a report that says Ukraine refused. Well, then they came back later and said, no, we didn't refuse. It's just we didn't agree to Russia's demand. And the reason why Russia is asking, and this is my personal opinion, why Russia is asking for Ukrainian government to give the order to lay down the weapons is to avoid this particular aspect. There is another thing that just happened, which is Germany now decided to send Stinger missiles to Ukraine. And where those missiles will be placed, it will be placed in residential areas. Why is that again? It's because if Russia bombed those residential areas, it will consider a war crime. Because in wars, you're not supposed to sort of target civilian locations or residential areas. But it's a war. It's conflict. It's never pretty. You know, once again, I'll go back to my first point. You know, we could have avoided all this. You know, then why are we pushing? You know, the West has been pushing. Let's just Be straightforward. And we're not advocating here for Russia, whatever. We're speaking objectively. And that's what I stand for. And you guys know this. We're speaking objectively. We won on our word after 1991 when we said we are not going to expand eastward. What do we expect? I believe President Putin has been patient with them. Has been hoping that the European or NATO will come to its senses. They provided the security request that they wanted in writing, guarantees from the West, but the West sort of kind of shrugged its shoulders on that. So now, this is the outcome we are seeing, and the arguments that is now circulating is that is Russia now pulling Europe into a war? Well, I'll say, hold on a second. There are a lot of emotions right now. A lot of people are emotional. So sometimes, as you all know, guys, you never make a decision when you are emotional, when you're upset or whatever. You'll never make a decision. That could be the possibility for that. But let's use history as our guide. What happened in 1991 in Kosovo? Okay, if you check history, it was NATO that created the problems in Kosovo. History tends to, as I always say, it provides us glimpse and lessons into understanding why certain behaviors reemerge, why certain aspects of history tends to repeat itself. And if I am to, as an analyst, if I am to evaluate what's going on with Ukraine, I can also evaluate it to what took place with Georgia a couple of years ago, when the former president back then, Mikhail Saakashvili, he fell for what NATO was saying, lip service, basically. So when the Russian army went in, took over within 5 days. And this is why NATO has declared yesterday that it will be no NATO intervention inside Ukraine. Well, what does it mean? You all know what it means. For the Ukrainian president to assume otherwise, he must have been naive about international affairs and how things work. The bottom line to it is the world, NATO and the EU, US and all that, they're not going to risk the lives of their soldiers. They're not going to die. I'll say it straightforward. They're not going to die for Ukraine. That's the bottom line to it. Let's not sugarcoat it, because the media is going to be wording it differently. And this is why I wanted to come on the air and provide you this particular update, just to put things in perspective for you. So the other question that's going to be coming now is the individuals holding weapons in, and as a matter of fact, by the way, Russia now is aware of certain weapons that they are in storage inside Ukraine, which means what? They're going to take control of that. That's over $1 billion of weapons. Yes, it's our tax money that has been used for that. And I can just see the language that's going to be now emanating from the halls of NATO and the halls of Washington and the EU. Well, we need more spending to counter Russia now that we saw what happened. We need more spending to increase the defense budgets of the United States. We need more weapons. I can just see that happening. Why? Because now they're going to argue that the justification for that is what we are seeing currently. And that is why, at least when it comes down to understanding why Russia is behaving the way behaving, it's because they want first to demilitarize Ukraine, because it will be very important for them security-wise. When you get into the security architecture, those are the basic understanding, the basic tenet of the security guarantees that you want to ensure that your country, whatever that country might be, does not fall problem to. So basically, Russia is going to inherit about $1 billion worth of Western weapons They're not going to be destroying them because they will know where they are. So the bottom line, the game is over in Ukraine. So yes, the United States offered the President Zelensky way out to leave Ukraine. He said, no, I don't want to leave. You want to stay in the country, whatever, defend this country. More power to you. Good luck. And that's basically what it's going to be. So why? It's because conflicts are terrible things, you know. And this is what's going to happen. The individuals now that are holding weapons, they have only two choices. Basically, that's what it is. Either they have to lay down their weapon and surrender, or they're going to die. You know, it's sad. It's sad to even for me to be saying this, because you will think, will this stuff ever end? And this is where the problem is. Ukrainian could have solved this issue before, but Ukraine government had no say. You know, Ukrainian government was ordered to behave certain ways. That's the unfortunate thing, because it's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. That's the sad part about it. The third aspect that I want to highlight to you, it has to do with, is World War III on the horizon? I always say no. And I say it with a heavy heart, because I can only imagine the day after what it will be like. And I don't even want to think about that for the sake of humanity. You know, yes, I'm here. I'm over the Atlantic. This is what some people do not understand. But even for us, way out here, if that reached that threshold, we're all going down. Because it will be no winner. That's the bottom line to it. It will be no winner. I don't see it going that direction, because once again, we all know what's going to happen. My fear is those behind the scenes who are pushing for war, who are pushing for these tensions to keep going, who are saying, no, let's arm the Ukrainians so they can defend themselves. And Ukraine is not going to stand a chance against a well-trained army. I read something about one of the guards in Kiev was standing on the bridge, and I read up a little bit about his background, and I found out that he only shot 16 rounds in his life, and yes, he's guarding a bridge. Really? I mean, not to put the soldiers down, not to disintegrate. I have great respect for them as human beings. But at the same time, we got to be pragmatic and realistic as far as the expectations. I'm not saying that everybody should be scared of Russia. That's not what I'm saying. No, but at the same time, you're going to have to sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Choose your battles. If I am to engage with somebody, let's say in a fight, for example, and I know that I'm going to lose, why will I even get engaged in a fight to begin with? And sometimes taking a step back, it doesn't mean you're weak. And this is where my big concern with this. So World War III, because you are going to start hearing the hypes about it. No, it won't be, because that will be a mutual destruction basically for everyone. That's what's going to be. And it's not a reality, Where I do see the problem is, personally, where I see the problem is of this muscle flexing from the West. That is where I see the danger of that. For example, let's say hypothetically the sanctions enter into effect, and I mean, don't even assume that Russia is not going to retaliate. No, I guarantee you this, and I personally, in my personal opinion, I got an idea of what is the first thing is going to be doing. And the first thing is going to be doing is shut down the economy of Ukraine altogether. That's one. And second, we will be dealing with it here in the US from water treatment facilities, to financial systems, to power grids and all that. Then there is another alternative. There is another aspect that you don't hear much about. And this one has to do with internet cables. If you know where they are, you have to go to Ireland, in the area, vicinity of Ireland, and you go to the waters there. That's where the cables of the Atlantic and for all this communication that's going. All Russia needs to do is send its submarines and cut off the cables. I'm sure they're not going to get to that. That will be a desperate measure and desperate sort of act. That's when no other alternatives. But the fact for us to think in the West, thinking that, oh, we're going to impose these harsh sanctions on Russia and Russia just going to sit there and take it, it's delusional. Because that's what's going to be happening. And I can guarantee you this, that's where the big concern. The other question that we need to think about as we move forward in this conflict, because it's going to develop. Russia already vetoed one aspects of the UN Security Call, and you're hearing now the European. You're hearing about the United Nations and NATO talking about Article 4, not Article 5. Article 5 is for NATO. That's usually if a NATO member is attacked, the alliance will have to come to the help of that particular member or ally. Article 4 has to do with the sovereignty, the respect of rights, and so forth. But at the same time, if I am to think about Article 5, and if we are to think about even Article 4, how come Europe is not sending their soldiers to inside Ukraine? But also because Russia made it clear that it will be no foreign intervention, the same way they did in Syria. That's why it was Russia that controlled the Syrian conflicts. And this is where I feel not sad, you may use the term, but sort of unwise of the Ukrainian president for him not to get it, that the West is not going to risk fighting a nuclear Russia. That's why I was surprised that his advisors or whomever couldn't convince him with that reality, because it is a reality. And this led me to talk about one thing before I forget. Have you guys noticed that there are two countries in north of Russia that they have great ties with the EU, great ties with the US, but also have an understanding with Russia? And those two countries are Finland and Sweden. Did you notice that Finland and Sweden never joined NATO and have no intentions of joining NATO, and made it clear to NATO that they are not interested? Are there any problems between Russia and Finland? Are there any problems between Russia and Sweden? Makes you wonder. And this is why I kind of challenged the former president in my writing. Of course, I didn't challenge him personally. But when I wrote my Russia book, and I disclosed that information here, I did challenge his assertion. That was the Georgian former president, Mikhail Saakashvili, when he said the next thing, and I quote this because I remember it, when he said that the next thing that Russia is going to do is they're going to invade Finland and Sweden. And I kind of shook my head to statements coming out of a president. He didn't understand the strategic thinking of Russia. He didn't understand the reality as to why Finland and Sweden never wanted to join NATO. And yet they have a great relationship with Russia, a mutual respect, because they understand that they will never allow offensive weapons to be installed on their territory because they are closer proximity to Russia. So, and this is one of the realities that the West is not bringing up to the conversation at all. The last point I want to talk to you about before I leave here is the idea that you need to think in terms of, okay, what's next? Because now, to me personally, it's clear that this now the operation is not going to be limited to Donbass anymore. They're going to move forward. And the question that's going to become is, what's going to happen for the future of the two regions, the independent regions, Donetsk and Luhansk? What's going to be happening? Are they going to remain independent? Okay, because they are independent state now, whether Ukraine likes it or not. Or assuming that Ukraine and Russia come to an agreement, or these two independent entities or states, whatever you want to call them, end up being reintegrated into Ukraine, but that respect of their autonomy and the right of the Russian people or speaking population will be guaranteed. This is one of the key questions that I personally wondering about, because as the events unfold, I am thinking, could it be that Vladimir Putin wants to do one particular objective, and that objective is split up Ukraine into two? There's a possibility. But if that happens, another question, another issue arises, and this one has to do with border demarcation. And if that happens, then what's going to be happening to Minsk agreement? Because as of today, that agreement is dead. And whether Ukraine will agree to recognize the independence of the Russian-speaking entity states in the Donetsk and Luhansk, I can't answer that right now because I don't know. Depending on how the involvement of the special operation here or the military intervention goes. And I will make sure to provide you an update next week as I read up on certain things and reach out to some of my contacts overseas. It's because it's going to be a lot of information from different directions, and you guys need to have a clear understanding. And I did say this is the last thing I will, but there is one more thing that I need to add to you, because I always want you to think in terms of global, big picture. How do you think China right now is thinking? And what does the individuals in Taiwan are thinking? Because that will be the next one. I can guarantee you that. So, food for thoughts. So this is what I wanted to come on the air and share this with you guys, is to provide you this brief insight, shall we say. And I hope you find this information useful, at least clear up some fog, shall we say, because there are so many bombardments of information. So I always like to do this for our viewers, is to and supporters, by the way. And by the way, if you have not subscribed, please do so now. We'll truly appreciate your support. Is the idea of truly, because you're going to be hearing a lot of information emanating from different media outlets. So I wanted to provide you straightforward, to the best of my knowledge, my ability, and this is my own opinion. I don't speak on behalf of anybody, and this is as I know the reality to be, as one who's been on the ground, and I have an understanding of what's going on in that part of the world. Not only because I wrote a book about it, but I've been following that for quite a while. So, without further ado, I will say I hope you have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you next time. As always, guys, stay informed. Till next time. Bye-bye.